click on the recording. So I want to show you what languages are going to be upcoming. So we have Rust, then we have a language called Go. Go is something that Google is developing. Again, syntactically similar to C. Most of these are based on C and C++, but again, this is for a specific type of audience. And then you have another language called Julia. I think Julia is the one that you have to really pay a lot of attention to, because it is expected that Julia is the only language that can probably replace Python's versatility in the next 5-10 years. But do remember, languages never die. You know, a language like C and C Sharp and C++ have been around for many, many years. VBA, for example, Visual Basic support by Microsoft was stopped in 2011, and it still works, right? Organizations still work heavily on Visual Basic, and that will happen even going forward. So if the question is, Havish, can you guarantee that Python will be there after 15 years? Of course, yes. Will it be the only language? I don't know, right? And if you look at a Stack Overflow programming language ranking, for those of you who have not heard of Stack Overflow, this is the #1 developer community in the world. So for all languages, so whenever you have a question, you can go to the community and ask them. I just want to show you a quick chart, and this will give you an idea of course, what type of job profiles and all are coming, but we're not really concerned with that right now. We want to look at, I can't seem to find it for some reason. One moment. Let me Google it. I think that would be better. And okay, look at this one. So this is the latest Stack Overflow developer survey. So across the world, they have spoken to different developers, hundreds and thousands of developers. And you know, these are very senior developers. And very clearly, you can see that, let me just zoom in. So you can see that JavaScript, we have HTML and CSS, we have SQL, we have Python. Now, please remember, JavaScript and HTML, CSS are not really programming languages, right? For those of you who are not aware of these terminologies, please understand, JavaScript and HTML, CSS are used for website development. SQL, even if you have not worked on it, you know, is a database language. It's a query language. And Python is #1. In fact, Python is even coming a little higher than Java. And this just goes to show you that this is how prevalent Python is everywhere. Now, there are new languages like TypeScript, which I'll talk about a little later. And then, of course, you have some new languages coming in. So let me, do you see this? VBA is still 6.2%, despite being discontinued for so many years. And now these new languages like Rust and Dart and all are coming up, but you don't really need to concern yourself with it. So one thing is for sure, Python is here to stay. The question that you might want to ask is, but Havish, is it important for us? Now, without knowing what your job profiles are and what your career path is, I can't really answer that question. But I can say with a fair bit of confidence that it will help you no matter what. Whether you are in brand management or product manager and HR business partner, you don't know what you don't know. So today, I ask you, do you think learning Python can help you? You wouldn't even be able to answer that because you don't know what the capabilities are. And that is exactly what I want to show you today. One is what the capabilities are, and number two, what should be the learning path? How should you learn it? Okay, now installing Python is, I'm not going to do this in detail, but because some of you might be curious to know how we do this. So you can go to the official website, which is python.org. And that's it. You can just click on download. 3.8.5 is the latest version. And it is available for everything. So it is available for Mac, Windows, Linux, you name it. And for every operating system, Python will be available. But only installing Python will not help you. If you want to work on a programming language, you need something called an IDE, which is an integrated environment where we run our codes, right? So that is the software development side of it. Now, there are many IDEs available. Some of them you might have heard of. So we have Visual Studio. We have Visual Studio Code. Let me just open it to show you how it looks like. Now I know it's not now it's not going to look very exciting, but this is how it is, right? It's a tool where you can run different languages. Like I have a simple code running here. This is one option. Then for Python, one of the best ones is something called PyCharm. They have a paid version and they have a free version. And again, you can download it free of cost. It's very simple to install. Now, what you should be doing is not to work on PyCharm and Visual Studio because you will find it very complicated. What you should do is to work on something called Jupyter. The name Jupyter, I don't know if some of you might know this, the name Jupyter actually comes from three things. So JU stands for Julia, which is the language. PYT comes from Python and R comes from the R language. So Julia the Jupyter essentially is a notebook which runs on the internet, right? So it runs on your browser. It doesn't mean you have to be connected to the internet, it's just that it runs on your browser. Now you can install Jupyter in multiple ways, but one of the easiest way to do it is to install something called Anaconda. This makes it very simple. Anaconda is a free distribution. What it does is that when you install Anaconda, of course you have to install Python first. So remember, first you have to install Python from the website, then you install Anaconda. The installation is very seamless. It's very simple. And when you install Anaconda, it will automatically have Jupyter as well. Now let's look at how Anaconda looks. So we have my Anaconda navigator. I will right click and open it. So this will take about 10 seconds to open, right? And again, Anaconda is available for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Okay, let's wait for it to open. And I think Anaconda is open now. So this is the first window that you see. And like I don't work on R. So if you want, you can install R from this. You can work on Jupyter. And then you have some other things available as well. We don't really need to concern ourselves. As you can see, I have Visual Studio Code as well. Let me give you an example. Now let's come to what is it, Havish, that Python can do that I can't do on Excel or on Tableau or on Power BI. Let me show you. I will launch it, and you notice that when I run Jupyter, Jupyter is actually going to open on my browser. So if you look at the URL, it says localhost 8888/3. It could be other numbers as well. So it's running on my browser, all right? What is this? What is it showing me right now? It is showing me my source folder. So right now my source is my C directory, my users and Havish Mad, and this is my source, okay? So everybody just understand this. This is C, users and your name. Of course, you can change it if you want to, but by default, this is the root where all the files will be there. So you notice I have a lot of these files called IPYNB. IPYNB basically are interactive Python notebooks. So the I stands for interactive, PY is Python, and NB is notebook. Now let's do some examples. We have a very nice example that I've taken for you. This is my YouTube. Now let me ask you, when you are on YouTube, can you download a video? Yes or no? Guys, can you download a video? Yes or no? Some, Ragul, some of them yes, but not all of them. Not all of them, guys. Also, there are certain videos which are very long and they will not give you that feature. So it is not possible to download all videos. Also, if you're working on the laptop, right, like this, there is a download button. You don't have a download button here, right? Now you have these fishy apps and all available for Android that allow you to download it. But there are workarounds that you can do, but then there will be restrictions in terms of the resolution and all, right? So what is with me right now is a simple code, which is YouTube. One moment. I'm sorry, I have a lot of things right now. Let me just find it. So this is a simple code right now where we're looking at this code, right? All I have to do is I have to run the code. It asks me to enter the URL. So I'll just go to YouTube and select any one. It doesn't matter. So let me just select this one by Microsoft, which clearly cannot. Come here and paste the code and we press enter. So you notice it is downloading the video, right? And if I go back to my folder, you will notice that this one, just go download it. I think it's this one. Let's just check, use presentation mode. Is this the video that I have? Yeah, this must be the one, right? So the video has been downloaded. Now let's understand the code. Codes like these are available for free on the internet, okay? What you see here right now, I have maybe made one change to it, but basically this is available. Let's put it like that. So I don't take any credit for it. Now, especially for beginners, the question is, oh, is this all that Python is? You go online and you copy codes and you paste it. See, you have to understand that programming is not just your inference and your insight and your analysis. Programming is working as a community. Programming is reading a lot, looking at what other developers are doing, talking to them, sharing your problems, asking for solutions. If you look at my bookmarks bar, let me just close this tool, we don't need this. If you look at my bookmarks bar, everybody, you will notice that like my specialty is Excel. Just look at the number of links that I saved for Excel. Why do you think I do this? Is it because I don't remember stuff? Absolutely not. Because I work so much, I need to have a catalog of everything that I'm working on. Like I've been working on Python for a year. So you notice I keep a record of everything that is important to me. This is very important when you're working as a developer. The challenge is not that codes are not available. The challenge is not even that you have to understand how it works. The challenge is that you have to know how to search for it. What are the right websites? Maybe you will find half the code in one place and half the code in a different place. How do you combine both of them, right? So what I want to do right now is I want to take a simple, very simple example. And for this, I will close this. And one moment, let me just come to my, one second, guys. Which one should we do? I think we can do the Seaborn one. Let me make a new notebook right in front of you, okay? I'll do it from scratch. So let's go to new. I will click on Python 3. Now this is the interface for Jupyter. You can give the name. So let's just call this demo session. Now see, I'm not going to bore you telling you how codes are written and what are the data types and what is syntax and what is comment. But you have to understand it is important. It is impossible for you to make any headway in Python unless and until you learn the fundamentals. Where do you learn the fundamentals? I leave it up to you. Read a book, do an online certification, do a course, go to YouTube and watch. Whatever makes you comfortable. What I want to show you is practically how it will help us. Now, Python has something called libraries. There are over 1,000 libraries available. So you notice TensorFlow is something used for machine learning. Google created it, but now they have made it open source. So this is one of the largest ML platforms, right? Then you have a lot of other ones. Some of them I'm sure you would have heard of, like Selenium. Now, Selenium is not something only for Python. Selenium is available for every platform. For example, if I search for something like regex, regex is a tool, is a platform used for data cleaning. It's one of the best platforms in the world. Now, regex is available for Python. Obviously, regex is available for, let's say, Java. It is available for JavaScript. It is available for C#. What am I trying to tell you is that programming never happens in a silo. If you already know a program, even if you did it in your school days or in college, it will help you. Learning Python will be easier. But that doesn't mean you can't learn it if you're starting for the first time. A library is nothing but essentially a package that has been created. Who has created it? It could be anybody. For example, there are certain libraries that are inbuilt in Python. Python libraries inbuilt. So if you notice these, let's say date time, CSV, how to handle CSV files, how to work with collection, all of these are inbuilt. Why? Because these are some of the most rudimentary libraries that you require. Okay, so some functions and some libraries. Of course, all the documentation is there. But then there are other libraries that other people have created. Now, this people is literally a community. It's not an organization. Okay. For example, everybody must have heard of Seaborn, right? So if you go to Seaborn, the entire documentation is available. What is Seaborn? Seaborn is a library which is for data visualization. Okay. And if you notice, GitHub and Stack Overflow. Everywhere where you go to a website, you always find these two terms, GitHubs and Stack Overflow. Now, Seaborn is a library based on another library, which is called Matplotlib. Again, one of the most popular ones. Now, the question is, if I try to do something, it will tell me that I don't have Seaborn installed on my computer. How do I install it? To do that, I will go to Anaconda, but this time I will go to my Anaconda prompt, which is my command prompt. So I will run as administrator. Now, I know all of this seems very geeky and very programming like, but this is very, very limited. This is only used when you want to install something. Okay. Now, if I say Python, it tells me some details. It tells me the version that is there, 3.7. Now, let me exit it. Okay. Now let's do that once again. If I say pip install, okay, pip is a package installer. Basically, I'm installing a library which is available. Now you will say, but Havish, where is it? Where is it stored? Where is the website? You don't need to do anything. You just say pip install, and then you decide which library you want. For example, if I want, let's say pandas, again, something used for data science. So it will tell you requirement already satisfied. That means it is already installed on my computer. If I say pip install, let's say Seaborn, it tells me again, it is already installed, right? But it's good to double check. Now, what I will do is, I know that Seaborn is installed on my system. That means some folder somewhere has the library installed in it. But I want to use it for my purpose. So I will import it. So I'll import Seaborn. Now, because I don't want to write Seaborn 100 times, I will give it a nickname, like a short name. I'll call it SNS. Why is it SNS? It could be anything. You can write whatever you want. SNS is a rite of passage. It's a standard that we all follow. Similarly, I will import my other libraries as well. So I'll import my NumPy as NP. This is again a nomenclature that we follow. And I will import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. This is again the standard. And what else do we need? NumPy C1 pandas. So we have import pandas as PD. Let's run this. Now you notice nothing will happen. All that has happened is that these libraries that are already installed on your computer can be used now. How can I use it? By giving these names, NP, SNS. Okay. Now there are some inbuilt data sets within Seaborn. So I will say that there is a data set called tips. So you can Google it. If I search for Seaborn tips dataset, let me just show you what the dataset looks like, okay? Because otherwise you will not understand the problem. This is the tips dataset, everybody. What does it have? It has the details for a restaurant and the tip that was received. Basically, what is the bill amount? This one. What is the tipping amount? The gender, male and female. Smoker is yes and no. Days, I think there are only 4 days here. Let me just remember. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay. So an extended weekend. Time is dinner or lunch. And the size is the number of people who had lunch or dinner. Now you will say, Havish, how large is the data? It's 245 rows. It's not a lot. Okay. Then you will say, how many columns are there? And I'll tell you, there are only 7 columns. And you might say, what's the big deal? See, a data set never needs to be large for it to be exciting. Take the misconception out of your head. But this is the data set and how it looks. How do I work with it? I will say that, let's say tips. Again, remember, this is just a name that I'm giving, is equal to, now I want to load my data set. So I'll say SNS.load and then underscore data set, and which data set we want to load the tips data set. So what I've done, I have loaded this data set called tips and I've given it a name called tips. Remember, this name could be anything I want. Once I've done that, now let's come to the interesting bit. Let's say you want to create a relationship plot, which is a scatter plot. So you will write SNS.rel plot. Now on the x-axis, what do we want to keep? You might want to keep, let's say, total bill amount, and on the y-axis, the tip amount. because you want to see a correlation, right? So I say X is equal to my total bill, which is the column heading, and the Y amount is equal to the tipping amount. And what data are we referring to? We are taking the tips data set, the name that we have given earlier. When I run this, it will make a scatter plot for me. Now, this is where questions start coming in. People say, literally, Havish, all this effort you did for a scatter plot, I could have done this on Excel. And I agree with you. I agree 100% with you. So different people have different requirements, right? So somebody who's working on a machine learning project or with big data, you're working with, like I was working with GSK a few days back, and they had, I think, 50, 60 lakh rows. Of course, you can't do that in Excel. So you have to do it here. Also, the level of customizability that you get on Python, because it's a programming language, will be unparalleled. For example, let's say I want to add different colors, let's say one color for the smoker, one color for the non-smoker. Now here you call it a hue. So I say that hue is my smoker. And one moment. And you notice now you get a legend like this, where you get a yes and no like this. Okay, then you say, Havish, I want to change the style. Basically, I don't want a dot for both the smoker, yes and no. I want a different type. So I can go to style, and I can say my style is my smoker. What will happen now? Now you notice we get two different styles. We get a cross and we get a circle. So you understand where we're headed with this, right? Now, of course, let's say you want to change the color. So let me change the color. Let me add a color. Let's say palette. And I'll just use my standard, which I always do. So I'll say CHR. Let's keep this at 0.5. And let's say my L is equal to, let's say, 0.75. So you notice we have changed the palette of colors. So it's not orange and blue anymore. Now you will say, Havish, what is this? How do you know what these numbers are? This is called the cube helix palette. So this is called the cube helix palette. You can look in the documentation. So cube helix palette has, do you see the customization, everyone? And now it will start to make sense. And you will realize why I would prefer to use Python over Power BI or Excel. The number of parameters that you have here, which is the number of controls you have, will be absolutely fantastic, right? Like you will not get this level of control on other tools. Now you might say, but I also have Power BI. But do remember that even if you're working on Power BI, let me also tell you how you do this on Tableau. So if you look at Tableau, there is a library called tab.py. What does tab.py do? It is a Python library that allows you to integrate Tableau with Python. Similarly, if you're working on Power BI, you will see that when you're working on Power BI, also you have R and Python integration available. So I can run my Python code, my Python script directly inside Power BI like this, which is great, right? Which means I don't need to have Jupyter with me, right? Where's my Jupyter notebook? I don't need to have Jupyter with me. I can run the code directly inside Power BI. So see, these are not competitors, okay? Take that out of your head that, oh, do I have to pick one? Should I do this or do that? No, it's not like that. It is about which one is better at what capability. So Power BI is better at creating business intelligence and insights. But if you want to do some artificial intelligence, machine learning, you're not going to use Power BI for it, right? You're not going to use Tableau for it. And God forbid, you're not going to use Excel for it. You're going to use something like this for it. Now, this was just a small example I wanted to show you. But let me just give you another example. Wait. So just, these are all the inbuilt data sets that I'm showing you. Just see the sort of things that you can do with Seaborn, right? Like there are these faces and everything is customizable. Like if you want to change the height from 6 to 10, you make it 10. And I'm sorry, I have to actually run the entire code, but you will get the idea, right? Is it that Seaborn has more visualizations than Power BI and Tableau? Absolutely not. On the contrary, Power BI and Tableau will have many, many more options compared to Python. The reason why I want to use Python is not because it has more options, but because it can interact with other requirements that I might have. So let me close this and let's do a different example now. Let me show you how we can, one moment. Look at the animated bar chart. I'm sure all of you have seen this on LinkedIn. Let me run my code. Let me take my data set and just allow me to run everything. This looks like what? This looks like a normal bar chart, right? And you might be wondering, what's the big deal? Look at this. This is where Python can help you make these animated bar charts, right? So again, these you get full customizability. I can reduce the speed. I can even make it go backward if I want to, right? Of course, the data set here is very limited. I've just taken a sample data set. So let me explain the code to you, what all is happening. I've imported my library, pandas, matplotlib, then something called ticker, and then ticker is this, these things that come. And then we also have IPython and all you can ignore for now. PD is my panda, so I'm reading an CSV. Even if I don't tell you, you know what it is, right? It is basically me reading my CSV file. df.tail means this is my data frame, and I'm looking at the tail. That means the last 5 rows. If I'm looking at, let's say df.head, it will show me my, top 5 rows. If I say 10, it will show me my top 10 rows. Basically, this is a replacement for Excel. What you can do on Excel, you can do the same thing using pandas, right? Then this is all a comment. So when you see a pound sign, this means it's a comment. This is just for my understanding. I've created colors. So I've created a dictionary here. What am I doing? I'm saying that there are 5 colors I have for each of the state: Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, and Colorado. What are these? These are hex codes. So if you, like all of you know RGB, right? But if you say RGB to hex, you will notice that you can convert from RGB to hex. For example, let's select a color. If I select this color from my logo, what is it? In RGB, it is RGB 70, 140, 250. In CMYK for printing and designing, it is this. This is the hue, saturation, and brightness. And then you have your hex code, which is this. See, the hex code is something that is used for the internet. Like when you're working on a website, everything that you see is what? It is a script. For example, let me show you something fun. Do you see this, everyone? We have Google open. Let me show you something very interesting. I can right click and then say inspect. I'm sure a lot of you have opened this by accident, right? Many times. This is basically the script that is running at the backend. Google Chrome is a browser. The role of a browser is to take this code and convert it into a web page like this. Every web page is nothing but a code. For example, if I go to Harvard Business Review, what you see right now is some images and formatting and tables and all that. But if I right click and say inspect, you will notice that this is nothing but the Harvard page review, and the entire design of that website can be seen in the backend. And do you see how they have actually written this in code? Actually, this is no significance. It's just a fun thing that developers do sometimes. They put this as a part of the code as a comment, just for fun. Now let me show you something. Do you see this leading into post-COVID discovery? I'm going to right click and say inspect. Do you see this? It says leading into post-COVID discovery. If I right click and I say edit text, I can say Havish M Consulting, and I'm actually changing the website. You might say, Havish, what did you do? I mean, how can you change the website? Of course, we're not changing the website. We're basically just changing any text that is there on the browser. And the first time I did it, I started learning programming in 2015. I started learning JavaScript and HTML a few years back, and I was blown away. I said, what is happening? I mean, how can we just change the website like this? See, whenever there is a website, you can't hide it. That means on any website, even Harvard Business Review, I can go and see the code in the backend. There are elements in this which can be hidden. Do you see this? Startup, double click, floodlight, please do not remove. These are all internal, comments that people have written. But what does it show you? It shows you that programming is everywhere, Please take this out of your mind that, oh, programming is for programmers and IT guys, and for us as a business analyst, what difference does it make? It is there everywhere, as you can see. What you can see here on the style is nothing but, do you see this? Whenever I hover my mouse, it tells me what is happening, where is the data coming from, and what is the style? This style is the style sheet, which is called CSS, which is your cascading style sheet. This basically tells you how do you design a website. See, HTML is only the code like this. HTML will only show you text, but when you want to design it, just a moment. HTML. See, if you make HTML, you will just write code. But when you want to design it, you have to use CSS or JavaScript. Anyway, we don't want to get into detail in these areas, but I just wanted to show you that it is everywhere. Let's come back to our example. Now, what all is happening? We have imported the libraries. We have read our file. So I can obviously put any file that I want. Then I have defined some colors. And this is the customizability. I can put any colors I want. And then I'm creating a group. Anyway, we can ignore this. This is my figure size, which is 15 and 8. And then I'm basically running my code. Of course, you will go through it line by line to see what all is happening, but you will get the broad idea. Like, what is this? This is my population 1000. This is the ticker. This is telling me where will the tick marks come. This is telling me the parameters. Then this is the Y axis. This is the range that I want, right? Like this, you have the entire code. You have the H color. You have the alpha value. So everything is available. And finally, when we say draw underscore bar chart, I can choose this year that I want. So if I say 2016, it will make 2016 for me. And how do you make it animated? For this, I use something called animated to JS HTML, right? Which is what is animating it for me, basically. Right. So this was an example. I'll show you a few more. Let's say you want to create some beautiful visualizations. Let's say maybe the water polo. I was just experimenting with this a few days back. I hope I'm able to do this. 1 second. Yeah, do you see this, everyone? What is this? How is it animated? It's not on PowerPoint. It is an animation that is running on my browser, right? Now, I mean, you would be surprised to know this is all. That's it. It's just literally 7-8 lines of code. What are we doing? We are using some very different libraries here, not the common ones. So we have something called pie charts, as in a PYE, okay? So if you search for PYE, right, pie charts is a library available. Okay. Again, anyway, so you have, you're importing something, then that's it. I'm just running this. This 0.6 is the percent, so you can make it 0.8 and it will change it. You want to change the color, just write something else here. So let me write, I need 1 second. So RGB to text. So let me choose a different color. Let's say this one, hex code. I can just copy this code. Why did I cut it? Wait a second. Let me paste it here, run it, and you will change the color. And of course, a lot of other elements are there that you can manipulate as well. Let me show you one more example, something a little more exciting than this. Again, something I was working on some time back. Look at this. Amazing, right? Like, this is just, it's very similar to what we do on Power BI and Excel. Like Power BI has a plot called the Astor plot, which is essentially the same as this. But it's just like a pie chart with a twist. And it just looks so nice, doesn't it? Again, you will get the codes on the internet. All you have to learn is how to make the changes inside. Like everything is customizable. Do you see this? The radius and the center. So if I make it 50%, I'm sorry, I'll have to run my libraries again. So I basically, actually I've changed the offset here. Anyway, let's not get into this. So I've shown you some visualization, and now I want to show you, I've shown you the YouTube bit. Now I want to show you something very different. Let's look at, one moment guys. Let's look at a tour of the oil industry. Now there is a library called, this is not the one. One moment guys. Why can't I find it? Fortune 500, is this the one? No, this is not the one. One moment. Okay, look at this one. This is NLP, which is natural language processing. So I'm sure you must have been hearing about this for a long time. We in business, we call this sentiment analysis, right? Sentiment analysis basically says that, let's say you have Twitter, your tweets, or you have employee feedback. How do you know what does that feedback mean? It's a text, right? How do you convert a text into a score, which is the qualitative assessment? That is where you need sentiment analysis. So there is a library called NLTK, right? Which is a natural language toolkit. And there are, remember, this is not the only one. There are lots of different natural language libraries available. So there's something called Spacie as well. There's something called GenSim as well. Now, how does it work? I haven't done this, okay? Somebody else has made it, but I just want to show it to you. Brown is what we call a corpus, which is nothing but what is a corpus? A corpus is it's a data set, right? It's a large data set with a lot of data in it. And like this, I can see that, one moment. So I'm running let me just run everything. So let me run all. Right? Like I said earlier, I don't want to read everything. I just want to show you what we are doing. From my NLTK, I downloaded a sample file, which is called Brown. What is this? These are the words within Brown. These are the sentences within Brown. Brown is nothing. It's just a document, like you have the dictionary or you have the Bible. Okay. Now, there are different types of corpus available, and these are free sources. One of the most popular ones is the Gutenberg, right? Which is a library of 60,000 free ebooks, which basically any book that is whose copyright has ended is a part of Gutenberg. I'm sure you know who Gutenberg was. So Gutenberg was the guy who created the printing press, right? So the entire credit for making books available for the masses and not for the church was created by Gutenberg. Anyway, what are we doing? We're looking at the first 100 sources. We're looking at the data. Let's skip all this. Then we come to something called tokenization. What does it do? It will split up your sentences into words. This means when you have a sentence, it will basically break it into different words. Okay. Do you see this? I have a sentence like this and I have broken it into different words. Basically, after every word, there is a comma. Then I want to convert everything into lowercase. So I can convert everything into lowercase. Stop words basically are non-content words. So something like this, I, me, my, to, the, because. Now, whenever we're doing some sentiment analysis, or any machine learning, we don't want to look at these words. You know why? Because these words will come very often, but they don't have any significance, right? In absence of other words, what does it mean? Like if somebody has written whom, it doesn't mean anything, right? Okay, so we have removed this, and what else? Then, of course, we can, handle the punctuations and all. You can also create a stronger list of stoppers. Basically, if you want to add some stoppers of your own, you can do that also. Then you have something called stemming and lemmatization. So this is all English grammar. What it means is, if there are three words, let's say walking, walks, and walked. When you say stem means you're looking at the root word. What is the root word? Walk in all these three. So basically, these are not three words. It is only one word, which is walk, right? That is how we work with it. There are different models available. So this you can find on Wikipedia also. Okay, then you have something called parts of speech. Now, this is the important bit. Parts of speech allows you to say which portion of your word is a noun, which is a verb, which is a preposition. So he is a preposition, is a verb, walking, to, and then school is a noun, right? Something like this. Okay. Anyway, forget all this. Then, of course, we come to the machine learning part of it. So we are working with some vectors now. We use something called bag of words. So what we're doing is we are making a matrix of all the different words and the frequency that I have assimilated. Right? So we create a matrix like this. We create what we call a vector. And then we are using, now we come to the important part. So we're coming to the machine learning bit of it. Anyway, I won't cover all this in detail, but you can see that this is how you can literally run your data set, and this is how so you have to first test the data. I don't know how much you know machine learning, but like you have the naive-Bayes classifiers. So machine learning only has three things in it, okay? You have what we call supervised learning, which means that you are supervising, you're teaching the machine how to work. Then you have unsupervised learning, which means that the machine is learning on its own. It's a machine learning algorithm. And the third one is the reinforcement learning. This is what we consider to be the best one, because reinforcement means that a machine, when it makes a mistake, it learns from it. When a machine does something well, it learns from it, right? So in machine learning, we only have these three broad types available. And then, of course, you have different methods. Like some of you might work on Power BI, right? And Power BI, you have this cluster. So in Power BI, you can create these clusters like this. A lot of people ask me, Havish, how does Power BI know how to create customer clusters? You can do this in one click, but what is the model? So the model they use is something called a KNN, which is the K nearest neighbor. right? So it's an algorithm, one of the most popular ones. And like this, there are lots of others, right? So I won't really get into all this right now. You can pick up any good book and read about all this. But this gives you an idea of, when, like those of you who have never done this earlier, you must be wondering, what does a data analyst even do the entire day? This is what they do, right? This is what they write. Whether they do it in Jupyter or they do it on PyCharm, this is what they're working on. Google also has something called Google Colab, right? What is it? Same thing. Executable code and rich text in a single document. It's basically like Jupyter, but it's Google, so it's much nicer. Like this is a project that we were working on. So this was speech to text. Like I would speak to the system and it would automatically convert my speech into text, right? I will not be able to show this to you right now, but this is all the code. So I'm using a Google API right now to convert my speech into text. So same thing, right? It looks very much like Jupyter, but because it's Google, it's much easier to use. Okay. Let me just see what else I want to show you. One moment. So I've shown you how to install. Is it the future? Absolutely. Is it the only language? No. But for most of you, believe me, this is the only language you need to learn. With quite a lot of confidence, I can tell you that you guys don't need to learn JavaScript and Java and all that. Why would it help you? Then I've shown you how to run your codes and libraries and all that. Okay, one more thing I want to show you is Excel. So let me come to my Excel. Sorry. There should be one more. Why can't I find it? Just, okay, open PyExcel. Okay, so there's a library called OpenPyExcel, right? OpenPy for Python, Excel for Excel. Remember, there are other libraries as well. So Python, Excel. This, of course, is the latest and the most important one. But you have a few others, like you have this Excel RD and Excel WT. But these are legacy libraries. Okay, what are we doing right now? Just look at this part. Does it not make sense? We imported the library. We imported something called a workbook. Then I said my workbook and I defined my sheet as my active workbook. I said sheet A1 is equal to hello, sheet B1 is equal to world. Basically, I'm writing in my sheet in A1 the value hello and in B1 the value world. Then I'm saving the workbook with the file name hello world. Let me run this. Let me go back to my folder and you will see now I have a file called hello world. This one, I've just created it at 7:22 p.m. I'll open it. And you will notice that this will show you hello and world. Fundamentally, anything you can do on Excel, I mean, not everything, but most of it you can do with Python as well. What is it? Here I'm giving a sheet name. I can look at all my values. Let me show you something more interesting. Let's say you want to, 1 second, guys. Let's say you want to do a freeze pane. There is a command called sheet.freezePane. What is C2? It is a cell where you're applying the freeze pane. If you want to write a formula, you import another module from openpyexcel.utils. Utilities, you're importing formulae. The spelling is correct, okay? I have not misspelled it. What does it do? It allows you to write formulas in your Excel file. Now you might be saying, or thinking at least, what is the point? I mean, why are we doing all this on Python when I can do it on my Excel file directly? Because if you have to do it on one Excel, you can do it. I agree. What if I tell you that there are 100 Excel files in a folder and you have to apply a freeze pane to every one of those 100 Excel files? Will you not have to do it one by one? In Python, you can automate it. So Python has something called, I know it's a very funny word, it's called globs. 1 second. Rather a glob. So what is glob? Glob basically, it's a little difficult to explain. Just think of it as a pattern matching. Like I can tell Excel that, you open a link. I can tell Excel that, one moment. Okay, go to my folder. The asterisk means it's a wildcard. So search for every single file, which is a text file. Makes sense, right? So what will it do? I'll basically tell it any file that is a .xlsx, find it. I'll give you an example here also. Just give me a second. So I don't know if I use glob or, oh, yeah, I have used glob. What are we doing right now? I hope it makes sense. We are saying that in C, users, Avishman, downloads, DND, sales. What do I want? I want you to pick up every file which has the word called sales, but it could be sales for any year. It could be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So I'm basically making a list of all the files. I'm combining, I'm what we call appending all the files like this. So if you notice, it is combining all the 3 files right. So these are the sort of things where Python can help you automate tasks, right? Now, one more thing I wanted to show you was, just give me a moment. Mouse and keyboard. I've not spent a lot of time on this. This is called screen automation. I'm sure all of you have heard of RPA. RPA is what? RPA is just a fancy terminology that has been given. RPA is not a new topic. RPA, which is business process automation, has been around for a lot of years. So when we say screen automation, what does it mean? It means that we're automating the screen. For example, if I have Canva, everyone, and I have created a certificate, okay? I tell you that there are 20 people for whom I want to generate a certificate. What will you do? Just correct me if I'm wrong. You will open Canva. This is where the process will start. You will double click on the name. You will write a new name, let's say. Then you will go to download. Okay. You will click on download again. What will happen? This file will get downloaded in my downloads folder. Then I'll click on the cross. Then I will again come back, double click, give a new name. Imagine you have to do this 100 times. Yes or no? Of course you do. Now some of you will say, Havish, why can't we make duplicate pages and download it? Of course you can. But then you will not get 100 unique PDFs. You will get one master PDF, right? Now what I've done is like, this is what I have automated. It's a very good example. What I've done is I've created a code which basically automates this entire task. Let me explain how this works. We have a library called PyAutoGUI, which basically is a graphical user interface automation. Let's see how this works. Very simple. Do you see this part, everyone? Just see, when I run this, 1 minute. When I run it, did you see this? 1920 1080. What is it doing? It is telling me that the resolution of my laptop is 1920 by 1080. Now, how did it know what the resolution is? That is what PyAutoGUI can do. Let me do one more. It is saying, what is the color of the part that I've selected on the screen? For example, everybody watch, I'm selecting this yellow color. When I run it, it says the color is, I'm sorry, I have to run this one. 1 second. What is the color? It is, what is happening? 1 second, guys. Okay. So it is telling me 248, 248, 248. If I again click and I click here on the blue area and I say run, it will give me, oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. I'm sorry, this is actually 1 second. I'll give you the right one. Testing, I haven't done this for a long time. So 1 second. Show a different one. Okay, let's look at this. I think this you will understand. Do you see my bookmark right now? How do you hide the bookmark? You can either right click and say show bookmarks bar, right? The shortcut is Control Shift and B for Bombay. Now what have I done here? I have automated this process. Do you see this? This entire part that I've selected. So you notice I'm not doing anything. I'll run the code and it will automatically hide my bookmark for me like this. How is it working? I've imported 3 libraries, time, PyAutoGUI, and keyboard. I'm measuring the size. Then time.sleep means there is an interval. That means when I click on run, it will wait for 3 seconds before the code will run. And what does it do? It will actually press this button for me, literally using the software. So I don't have to press Ctrl Shift B, it will do it automatically. Like that, I have automated my entire process. So you notice it will download all the certificates, put it in a folder, and also rename all the folders to make sure that every certificate is the name of the participant. Right. My voice is breaking. I haven't done anything different. I hope it's okay now. Right. So guys, that's what I wanted to show you. I hope now you have a sense of what all it is that Python is capable of. You know, there are so many things that it can do. And look at this one as well, a tour of the oil industry. This is something I was working on yesterday. I'm doing a session at Indian Oil. So just trying to see what all I can find. 1 second. Anyway, you can just see the results. So just experimenting. I was trying to see how we can analyze the data, how we can get data from the internet, you know. Like similarly, you can use Selenium if you want to go to money control and get some data automatically. That is also possible. How do you search for all this? There is a website called Kaggle. Most of you would know this. So Kaggle.com is the world's largest repository of for data science, for everything, for data science, machine learning, AI, and all. And let's say you're searching for something. Let's say you're searching for, let's say, beautiful soup, right? So beautiful soup is a library in Python, which is used for web scraping, okay, to get data from the internet. Let's take an example. Let me see if this person has created the, 1 second. I want to show you the notebook as well. 1 moment. So let me select my notebooks. Okay, so do you see this? Import request is just something when we're working with the internet. Pandas, you know, I'm importing beautiful soup. BS4 is the latest one. What are we doing? We are going to this website, right? And from that website, we can essentially scrape all the information, right? And actually, this is very boring, but let me see if I can show you the important part. 1 second, guys. Okay, hold on. I don't think this is the right example to show. Wait. God damn it, I can't find anything. Wait. A simple tutorial. I think this would help. And okay, it's making sense. Let's see. What are we doing? We are going to this website for IMDb. By the way, IMDb is one of the most popular samples that people use when they're working on data science. Okay, this is the URL. What do? We are looking at these tags. Do you see this, everyone? Span, class, lister, item, year. Now you might say, Havish, what is all this? So let me just copy this URL, go to my browser and paste it. Now, you notice that there are lots of details here. Like there is this 2018, but what is this 2018 in the code in the background, right? In the HTML code, I can right click and say inspect, and it tells me that this is, do you see this? Lister item year, everybody? Lister item year. The lister item year is a span which has a class, and the class is lister item year. And did you see what they have done? They have said that to get the year, you will have to take the span class lister item year. Now, if you have ever felt that the job of somebody who takes data from the internet or works in Python is easy, it's not. Literally, they have to do this. They have to go to the website. They have to go row by row, not line by line, literally. I'm just giving you an idea. Like if I want the title, I can right click and say inspect. What is the title called in the code? The title is called, actually, this is the link. 1 second. href is the link. Listed item index. But you get the idea, right? This is exactly how somebody who works on Python and takes data from the internet will be working. Right? Let's see how the score 6.2. Let's see this 6.2. Right click, inspect. Do you see this? 6.2. The 6.2 is my span class global sprite rating. And any website, like let me not show you this one, let me show you hotels.com, because I was doing a project for a client where I had to go to hotels.com. Okay, let's say you want to look at let's look at Paris. That must be the last one that I searched for. Okay, so we have, let's say 6974. Everybody, what is the 6974? Right click, inspect, and it will tell you that the 6974 is your, do you see the 6974? Where is this coming? Stripe tooltip block. This is literally the work that somebody who works on Python and web scraping has to do. But there are other libraries like Beautiful Soup and all has made it easier. So you don't have to write a lot of code, but you still have to do all this manually. And then you get the idea. Then we are basically combining everything, and then you can get a table like this. Like otherwise, how would you make a table? Like IMDb does not have a table for you, right? But this will make a table for you like this. By the way, all of these are downloadable. So if you go to Kaggle, you can download the entire code as well. You might be wondering, why would somebody make it and make it freely accessible, put in the hard work? But see, that's how the community works. If you search for machine learning, let's say Tensor, you'll be amazed to see the number of data sets and notebooks. There are 2,500 notebooks available only for Tensor. Amazing, right? Like, let's look at Kiran. See, everything is there. Of course, this will be a little boring for all of you, but you get the idea. Now, there is something called Tesseract. All of the Marvel fans would remember the word, but this is not that Tesseract. So Tesseract essentially is a project that was started by HP many years back, and Tesseract is basically an OCR tool. Now Google has taken it over. It was created by Hewlett Packard. Essentially, it's an OCR tool. It allows you to like when you have an image with you. Sorry. When you have some text with you like this, and you want to extract all this text from an image, how do you do that? You can use Tesseract for this. Like this, there are different libraries available, right? Good, I think I've given you a fairly broad idea in terms of what all it is capable of. I think the biggest takeaway for all of you should be that Python is not one thing. It's not data science, it's not web scraping, it's not programming, it's a little bit of everything. So I can say with confidence that for every one of you, some of the other use cases will come wherever you are working. Like you might say, but nobody asked me to do something on Python. They did not ask you because you did not work on it. Try to understand. Like the certificate example, I have done it for a lot of my clients. So what happens is, so I have done the certificate example for a lot of my clients. The HR tells me, Havish, I have to prepare and download 1,000 certificates every week, which happens, right, for large organizations, because large organizations love to give certificates to everybody. Anyway, they say we have to do it manually. Literally, they do it manually. Can you beat that? Like an e-copy, a guy is sitting and writing 1,000 names and download. I mean, it's crazy, right? What I have done is literally one click. You click on a button, go back, sit with a cup of coffee, wait for 5 minutes, and it will download everything, put it in a folder. If you wanted to send it to the person, if you even send it to the person, because you can even automate mailing, obviously, right? That would be one of the easiest things to do in Python. So you have to look at use cases for yourself, right? If you ask other people, they will say different things. Like for me, I do a lot of work on sentiment analysis. For you, you might say, Havish, it's not important to me. Possible. I do a lot of work on sentiment. So that's why I know, the nuances and the terminologies very well. For you, it might not be so important. Maybe web scraping is important. Maybe data visualization is important, right? So yeah, that would be that from my side. Anything you would like to ask? By no means am I an expert in Python. So I mean, I don't even conduct trainings and all on Python, right? The idea was, the reason I did this session, this is the first one that I'm doing, is because a lot of people ask me, I don't know where to start. I don't know if I should start. And I hope that at least, I know I haven't answered that question, but I hope that question has been answered for you, right? So I hope that you have a little more clarity now that you've seen what it is, whether it is something you might want to do or not. How to do it is a different question, but whether you want to do it or not. Web scraping, of course, I mean, goes without saying. I mean, web scraping has so much, but see, you have to understand. Now, Power BI can also do web scraping. Then you have Power Query can also get data from the internet. So it's not just Python which can do it. You can extract data from Power BI also. So see, this will happen. Try to understand. It's not just one tool that will offer you the capability. There'll be different tools. Like I can put a link in Power BI, and the same thing, I can extract my data like this. Rakul, I don't know. I mean, R and Python has overlap, but at the same time, it depends on your use case. and what is it that you want to do? I can't answer this in terms of the industry, Ananya. I don't think it's that one industry uses one tool and the other industry uses a different tool. In a lot of cases, it's a matter of choice, right? Like you want to do data visualization on Python or on R, it's your choice. Right? I mean, the best way to understand this is to look at some links and see how people compare these two. I would not be the best person to tell you because I don't have a lot of experience there. Right? But R is mostly an academic tool. Okay, try to understand. It's a tool meant for statisticians and academicians. That's why it's also very complicated to learn. This, on the other hand, is something meant for everybody, for the everyday user. That's why it's much simpler. Right? Good. Any other question? Well, I think most of you are leaving, but if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. The scope of Python and ML using Python being a B-School student, what are the different aspects of data I can explore and manipulate for starters? Avik, honestly, unless you are going to work in a job profile which requires you to know ML and AI, I don't think there is any use case for you. I think there is no advantage in learning it. Don't learn it in detail. Just know the basics. Just pick up a dummies guide. Like, there's a book by Dummies Guide, All-in-One Python. Just pick up this book. I don't think it's very costly. It's just 350 rupees, right? Just pick this up. It's a tough book, okay? I know it's called the Dummies Guide, but it's actually a fairly tough book. Read it. I think this will give you a lot of idea about what is AI, what is ML, how do you work with it. But I don't think you need to know how to do it, as in do it yourself. Because, I mean, if you're a B-School student, unless you're taking a job specifically in data science, why would you need to know how to work with ML and AI? That's not the future. The future is automatic AI and ML, right? So like a tool like Aria, so a tool like, you know what, forget everything. I think some of you have met me earlier during my sessions. Let me give you an example on a Excel file. Leave Python behind. You want to know how AI works? Let me show you. You might not have this feature with you, but that's okay. I'll give you an example. If you don't mind, I'll just close the other windows. This is a data set, a large data set with my sales data. I have region, product, segment, order date, all that. You know what I can do now with AI in Excel? I can click on this button called Ideas. Ideas uses Microsoft Cognitive Services. So what it does is you click on this button, it is sending your data, of course, in an encrypted format to the cloud. It is analyzing the data for you using its own intelligence, and it is going to give us results. So if you notice that this is just a raw data, there is no formula, function, pivot table, nothing. This is just a raw data set that I have. And once it does the analysis, okay, it's taking a little bit of time. Do you know how these results are coming? I did not tell it I want to see the quantity by segment and category. It is happening on its own, right? And even better, I can now say, ask a question about your data. So I can click on this and I can tell Excel, show me my sales and profit for all my regions. You click enter and it will automatically show you the sales and profit for all the regions. You want to say, who are my top 5 customers? You say, who are my top 5 customers in California in the consumer segment, right? So I'm making a difficult query. Press enter. Tells you these are your top 5 customers in California in the consumer segment. This is what is going to happen. Businesses at large are not going to end up using ML and AI. How will a GSK or a Tata Motors use AI and ML? You tell me. They can't. Of course, they will have a data science team, but 99% of the organization will never work on it. This is what they will be doing. And this is why we are democratizing AI and ML. This is why companies like Google and Microsoft are focusing on making sure that this becomes so easy for people to use. Like, I don't know how it is working, right? But I know it is working. I can ask a question very simply like this. Right? And like this, there'll be many, many more tools that will keep on getting added. I'll give you one more example. In PowerPoint, if I write let's say finance. You know what will happen? You write something, you click on design ideas, and automatically it is going to give you different designs related to finance. Do you see all this? Now, how is all this working? This is using Microsoft AI. Like, now I don't have to go online, search for a good image or a looping video. Everything can be done literally in a single click like this, right? And this is the small ways in which it will start to, impact the way you work. Like, we have a function called dictate now. Some of you might have worked on it. This is again an AI feature, uses Microsoft speech services. Do you know how it works? No, but we know it works very well. The dictate feature in Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word will allow you to speak to the system in real time, and it will transcribe your speech to text without any errors. The advantage here is that you can work with multiple languages, and it will help you save a lot of time. You get this? Now you want to convert it into a different language, right click on translate. Now I don't have to go to Google Translate. I click on translate, it asks me what language do I want. I can say I want to convert this into anything. Let's say Hindi. One click, it gets converted. This is what is going to happen. Microsoft is working so heavily on making sure that these AI and ML capabilities are available to users. Like, we don't have the time to cover all this, but like, you have an add-in available in Excel now called, one second. It's called sentiment analysis, right? So this uses Microsoft AI to, oh, that's strange. Azure Machine Learning, right? So you have machine learning available in Excel now. Well, how it works is, just give you a simple example. Which version? Okay, so Microsoft has different versions available. You need to have the latest one, which is Microsoft 365. But the features I'm showing you, some of them, like the question that I asked, that is not available, right? This feature will only come in 2021. Some of them will come in 2022. So I'm a Microsoft developer, so I get early access to features, right? So like, Microsoft shares upcoming features with what we call insiders, right? So we test it, we give them feedback, and then they launch it after some time. So some of these features might not be available for you. Okay, but in any case, you will need to have 365. 2007, 10, 13, 16, 19, it will not work. I'm just taking a simple data set. Use my sample data. Okay, why is my sample data not there? Oh, I haven't done this for a while. Just give me a moment. Why is it not creating my sample data? Anyway, let me try something. So my input is this, my output. It might not work. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm doing this properly. There's something that went wrong, but let's give it a shot. I don't know. Anyway, you can Google it. I have a video on this on YouTube as well, so you can have a look at that. Basically, this will use its machine learning to predict, not predict, but to assign a sentiment to the comment, whether it is negative, neutral, or positive. Anyway, the reason I wanted to show this to you is to tell you that Excel is going to have a lot of these features, right? Now you might say, but where were these features 5 years back? See, 5 years back, technology was not at a point wherein all of this would have been possible. But in the next 12, 24 months, you will see that a lot of these features will keep on getting added. Wonderful. So that would be all from my side. I hope there were some takeaways. I know the session is a little unstructured, but see, the idea of doing this session was not for you to become an expert or not for you to learn one thing. It was for you to get a sense of what it is, right? For a lot of you, I saw 60-70% of the feedback was that a lot of people said, I don't even know what it is, whether I need to learn it or not. Now, I hope you've at least seen what all it is capable of, right? Wonderful. So that will be all from my side. I will, you can be in touch. Anything that you want to ask, please feel free to let me know. Most welcome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. All the best.